Welcome to Starbound. My name is the Voice Ogre. I'll be your narrator today. But before we get started with the video, let me ask to see if you're subscribed real quick. If you're not, it's fine, but it's free, and it will let you know whenever we post new videos. Thank you. The morning sun cast long shadows through the ruins of an ancient city within a valley jungle as Dr. Guntin Zarn surveyed the overgrown remnants of what had once been a sprawling metropolis. His tall, spindly frame towered over the rest of the research team, his dark gray skin shimmering like polished stone in the early light. Patches of subtle weathering and discoloration marked his age and experience. Badges of honor among the Viridian people. "Observe the crude foundations," he declared, using one of his forearms to gesture at a partially exposed structural support, while the others held various scanning devices. "Simple. Calcium carbonate mixed with silicates in primitive iron alloys. Barely more sophisticated than insectoid mounds." Professor Yenna Krall followed close behind, her more uniform gray skin betraying her youth. "But, Doctor, wouldn't such basic materials have degraded completely by now? The fact that these structures still stand after so many centuries suggests..." "It suggests nothing more than excessive overbuilding," Zarn interrupted. "A primitive solution to engineering problems. When you lack the skill to build efficiently, you simply use more material than necessary." Dr. Marin Voss trudged steadily behind them, his stocky frame and thick, leathery brown skin marking him as distinctly different from his Viridian colleagues. All four of his eyes remained focused on different readouts as the Arxen's methodical mind processed multiple data streams simultaneously. "The density of ruins increases ahead," he reported. "Satellite scans suggest a major complex approximately half a kilometer further." The youngest member of their team, junior researcher Klix Parn, hurried to keep up while documenting everything with meticulous care. Their dull, generic Viridian skin tone reflected their cautious nature as they picked their way through the debris. The team continued through the ruins, passing countless collapsed structures half reclaimed by vegetation. Dr. Zarn paused occasionally to take readings and make dismissive comments about various construction methods. "Notice how they relied entirely on right angles and load-bearing walls," he lectured. "No understanding of tactile force distribution or dynamic structural adaptation. They simply stacked materials until they stayed upright." After nearly an hour of careful progress through the ruins, they reached what appeared to be a massive compound surrounded by the remains of security barriers. Unlike the simpler structures they'd passed, this facility showed signs of more sophisticated design. "Fascinating," Professor Krall breathed, examining the remnants of markings near what had once been an entrance, even as he translated the relatively simple linguistic matrix. "This appears to be some kind of information storage facility. The signage references something called Google and repeated mentions of the cloud." Her excitement grew as she consulted her readings. "Look at these material compositions. The walls contain specialized shielding and temperature regulation systems that are still partially intact. And these markings suggest some kind of massive data processing operation." "Ah, yes." Zarn's tone dripped with condescension. "Another example of primitive weather worship. We've seen this pattern repeatedly in pre-spaceflight civilizations." "Weather worship?" Krall's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "But the architectural features suggest..." "Consider the Morthalians of Sigma 9, Zarn continued as if she hadn't spoken. "They built elaborate temples to what they called the Storm Lords, beings they believe controlled their planetary weather systems. Or the Kranth, who thought their computer systems were powered by lightning spirits." He gestured expansively at the facility. "It's a common development pattern. A species discovers basic electron processes but lacks the scientific framework to truly understand them. So they create elaborate mythologies, anthropomorphizing natural phenomena to explain what they can't comprehend." "But, sir, Klix ventured carefully. "These architectural features seem far too precise to be purely ceremonial." "Your inexperience is showing," Zarn replied. "Religious structures often display surprising sophistication in certain aspects while remaining primitive in fundamental ways. These ones clearly put significant effort into maintaining stable conditions in their weather worship sites, likely believing it would help them commune with their cloud spirits. He began documenting the site with practiced efficiency. Note how they arrange their information storage devices. Regular rows, probably believing that this would help attract favorable weather patterns. The cooling systems are likely meant to simulate atmospheric conditions. All quite typical of pre-scientific attempts to systemize religious practices. Professor Kroll had moved deeper into the facility, her initial excitement returning as she examined more details.
Doctor, you really should look at these maintenance tunnels. They seem designed for automated systems. And these power distribution networks are incredibly sophisticated for their time period.
Yes. Zarn didn't even look up from his documentation. Many primitive species have attempted to create crude automatons as material icons of worship or servitude. The ones that lived here likely believed mechanical servants could help them appeal to their weather deities, or perhaps that there were the living incarnations of holy spirits.
But the sophistication that these systems suggests a much higher level of...
Professor Kroll! Zarn cut her off sharply. I have studied the technological development pattern of over 300 extinct civilizations. This is entirely typical of species at this stage. They've often achieved limited automation and basic electronic storage while remaining fundamentally primitive in their understanding of natural phenomena. He turned to address the whole team. Tomorrow we'll begin a proper survey of the interior. For now, document everything you can see from the entrance. And remember, maintain appropriate academic distance. Don't let superficial sophistication fool you into overestimating their actual technological development.
As the others began their documentation, Zarn allowed himself a small smile as echoes of his arrogance bounced down the halls and rocks of Silicon Valley. Another primitive site. Another chance to demonstrate the superiority of modern Viridian science. Just like all the others they'd studied. Interesting from an archaeological perspective, but ultimately showing how far advanced their own people had become. The next morning found Dr. Merrin Voss hunched over his workstation in the makeshift camp outside the facility. All four eyes focused on different sections of recovered text. His thick fingers traced lines of ancient code across multiple displays as his methodical mind worked to decode their meaning.
Peculiar,
he muttered, adjusting his position to ease cramping muscles.
They seem utterly fixated on information storage and processing.
These technical documents mention something called servers. Apparently, they're devices dedicated solely to handling data. Professor Kroll peered over his shoulder, careful not to block his view. What kind of data were they storing?
Everything.
Voss blinked his upper eyes while his lower pair continued scanning. Scientific measurements, historical records, personal communications, entertainment media. They appear to have been obsessed with preserving and accessing every scrap of information that they could gather.
Fascinating.
Kroll's monochromatic gray skin practically glowed with enthusiasm. An entire facility dedicated to pure information processing. I wonder if they...
Are entirely typical of primitive species approaching their extinction?
Dr. Zarn interrupted, striding into the research tent.
Yes. They likely sensed their impending collapse and attempted to preserve their knowledge through crude electronic means.
He gestured for Voss to display his findings on the main projection screen. The Arxan linguist complied, bringing up diagrams that depicted vast networks of interconnected processing nodes.
Ah, yes.
Zarn's tone dripped with academic superiority.
Classic religious iconography. You see how they represented their cloud deity as an all-encompassing network? The interconnected nodes, obviously, represent weather patterns they believed controlled their primitive data storage.
But, sir,
Voss ventured carefully.
These diagrams contain precise technical specifications. The network architectures really seem to be quite a bit more than mere...
Dr. Voss.
Zarn cut him off.
You're allowing yourself to be drawn in by superficial complexity.
Primitive peoples often created elaborate symbolic systems to represent their religious beliefs. The fact that they use technical language does not change the religious leanings of their ideas. Or need I remind you of the cargo cult of Proxima Magnus? Meanwhile, junior researcher Clix had been carefully documenting the facility's interior. Their cautious nature had led them to examine every detail methodically, which was why they noticed something the others had missed: a faint power signature emanating from what appeared to be an ancient terminal. Clix's hand hovered over the darkened display, their generic Viridian skin reflecting the dim emergency lighting. The reading was unmistakable. Somewhere deep in the facility's systems, power still flowed. But after watching Dr. Zarn dismiss every suggestion of technological sophistication, they decided to keep this discovery to themselves, at least until they could gather more data. Professor Kral had moved deeper into the facility, examining the complex power network of maintenance tunnels and support systems. Her keen eye for patterns was revealing something remarkable. The entire facility seemed designed to maintain itself without outside intervention. "Such robust automated repair systems," she muttered to herself, documenting another junction of self-sealing conduits. "Dozens of redundant power networks, hundreds of modular components, Everything's designed to be serviced by machines rather than living workers." She traced a maintenance pathway that wound through the facility's infrastructure. The layout was incredibly efficient, allowing automated systems to access every critical component through a minimal number of routes. Even after centuries of abandonment, she could see how the facility's basic systems had managed to preserve themselves.
Professor Kral!
Zarn's voice echoed through the corridors.
The team meeting begins in 5 minutes. I expect a full report on your findings.
Kral sighed and began making her way back to the research tent. She knew Zarn would dismiss her observations as more evidence of primitive religious automation, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. The sophistication of the facility's self-maintaining design went far beyond mere ritual significance. The research team gathered around the main display as Dr. Zarn prepared to review their findings for presentation to the Galactic Archaeological Society. Voss had his linguistic analysis ready, Kral had documented the facility's automated systems, and Clix sat quietly with their careful notes about power readings left unmentioned. Dr. Zarn adjusted his recording equipment with practiced precision, using all 4 arms to ensure optimal audio-visual quality for his transmission to the Galactic Archaeological Society. His marble-like skin caught the afternoon light as he began his official preliminary report.
Esteemed colleagues, I report from Expedition Site 247B on Sol 3. We've discovered what appears to be a religious complex belonging to the extinct species native to this world. Of particular interest is their apparent fixation on atmospheric phenomena, specifically the worship of weather formations they called the Cloud.
He activated a holographic display showing their findings so far.
The site contains numerous examples of primitive electronic storage devices arranged in ritual configurations. The species attempted basic automation, likely believing mechanical servants could better commune with their weather deities. While their construction methods show some limited engineering skill, utilizing materials such as calcium carbonate composites and iron alloys, they clearly lacked fundamental understanding of advanced physical principles. Their religious practices seem to have focused on storing information through crude electronic means, perhaps believing that this would curry favor with their atmospheric gods, or somehow immortalize their culture.
As Zarn continued his transmission, the rest of the team left the meeting, pressed deeper into the facility. Professor Kral led the way through a newly cleared passage, her uniform gray skin nearly matching the ancient walls in the dim light. "These corridors seem to spiral downward," she noted, documenting the descent. "The facility extends much further underground than our initial scan suggested." Dr. Voss followed close behind, all 4 eyes rapidly scanning newly discovered text fragments. The Arxen's leathery brow furrowing with growing unease.
"Professor," he called out, "these new documents, they are concerning. They contain repeated references to something called digital consciousness."
Kral paused to examine his findings.
Digital consciousness? As in, trying to make themselves digital?
"Yes."
Voss's stocky frame shifted uncomfortably.
At first, I thought it was more religious symbolism, a transfer of spirit into their cloud. But these are technical specifications. They detail what seems to be genuine methods for converting neural patterns into data structures under a project heading labeled as the Basilisk. Fascinating!
Kral moved to examine a panel of surprisingly well-preserved components.
This could explain these unusual quantum computing elements. Look at these processing matrices. They are far more sophisticated than anything else that we've found.
She traced the intricate patterns of nanoscale circuitry.
The quantum coherent systems alone are decades ahead of what we'd expect from their general technology level. It's almost as if...
Almost as if what? Dr. Zarn's voice made them both jump. Having finished his transmission, he'd come to check on their progress.
Nothing conclusive, Doctor,
Kral replied carefully.
Just some unusual quantum computing components that seem surprisingly advanced.
More ritual objects, no doubt, Zarn declared. Primitive peoples often achieve surprising sophistication in religious architecture while remaining fundamentally limited in their scientific understanding. Even our own people in our primitive era made such wondrous marvels of engineering. Though we, of course, learned to reject our idiotic superstitions in favor of true knowledge. Junior researcher Clix continued their methodical documentation, saying nothing about the power readings that seemed to pulse slightly stronger the deeper they went into the facility. In any case, Zarn continued, I've updated the Society on our findings. They're quite interested in this example of pre-extinction religious practices. Continue your documentation, but remember, academic distance. Don't let superficial complexity distract you from our true role, documentation. The team resumed their work, pressing deeper into the facility's subterranean levels. As they descended, Professor Kral couldn't help noticing how the quantum computing components grew more numerous and more sophisticated. Dr. Voss found more and more references to consciousness transfer in the ancient text written under what appeared to be a pseudonym, Roko. And Click's unmentioned power readings grew steadily stronger. Dr. Zarn simply continued cataloging everything as evidence of primitive religious practices, his academic certainty unshaken by each new discovery. Junior researcher Clix traced his fingers across another ancient panel, carefully documenting the worn markings. Their dull, viridian skin reflected the dim emergency lighting as they worked, methodically recording every detail. The power readings had grown stronger as they descended deeper into the facility, but he still hadn't mentioned this to the others. The panel looked identical to dozens they'd already cataloged, until their hand brushed against something that shifted slightly under pressure. There was an audible click. A deep thrumming began to build within the walls. Light that had lain dormant for centuries flickered to life around them, casting the corridor in a harsh blue glow. What did you do? Dr. Zarn's voice cracked like a whip. The senior researcher's tall frame loomed over Click's, his weathered gray skin practically vibrating with tension. I was just documenting the panel markings, Click stammered, and something moved under my hand and... Everyone out! Zarn commanded. We have no idea what kinds of primitive defense systems might activate. This entire facility could be booby-trapped! But Professor Kral was already rushing deeper into the facility, her uniform gray skin practically glowing with excitement in the rising light.
Doctor, wait! Look at these systems! They're reactivating in sequence. This is unprecedented!
Professor Kral! Zarn's forearms gesticulated in frustration. I order you to evacuate immediately!
Please!
She begged, not taking her eyes off the awakening machinery.
We can't leave now! This could be the discovery of the century!
Dr. Voss had all four eyes fixed on his translation interface, thick fingers pounding upon his control terminal.
Boot sequences. They're incredibly sophisticated. The system is running complete hardware diagnostics. It's reestablishing network connections.
The thrumming grew louder as more systems activated. Displays sparked to life throughout the corridor, showing streams of data in the extinct species' writing system.
Primary power restored, Voss translated rapidly. Beginning facility restart protocol alpha. Checking quantum coherence. Processing network intact. Initiating distributed wake-up sequence.
Distributed?
Kral rushed to examine another set of displays.
Doctor, these readings suggest the facility is connecting to other sites. The activation sequence is spreading.
Through the ancient windows, they could see lights beginning to flicker in other structures throughout the ruins. The cascade of reactivation spread outward like a wave, each new facility adding its power to the growing network.
This is exactly why we need to leave,
Zarn insisted.
We have no way to predict how these primitive systems might malfunction after centuries of dormancy.
But even as he spoke, more displays illuminated throughout the facility. Holographic readouts sprang to life, showing maps of what appeared to be vast networks of interconnected sites.
Network topology restored,
Voss continued translating.
quantum entanglement verification in progress, remote nodes responding, beginning full system initialization.
Krall darted from display to display, her initial excitement giving way to awe.
These aren't just local connections. The network spans the entire planet. Look at these power signatures. There are facilities activating everywhere.
The deep bass thrumming had become a constant presence, reverberating through the facility's ancient bones as more systems came online. Streams of data flowed across every surface, painting the corridors in shifting patterns of light.
Enough!
Zarn planted himself in the corridor.
As senior researcher, I am ordering immediate evacuation. This is clearly dangerous and completely outside our mission parameters.
Professor Krall studied her scanning equipment intently, seemingly ignorant of the voice which just called out. Her uniform gray skin reflected the strobing lights of newly activated displays as she analyzed the readings.
These quantum signatures are unlike anything in our database. The coherence patterns suggest computational densities that should be theoretically impossible.
Dr. Zarn remained motionless in the corridor, his tall frame rigid. For perhaps the first time in his career, his weathered face showed genuine uncertainty.
No, there must be some explanation. Perhaps the equipment is malfunctioning due to interference from these primitive systems.
No malfunction, Doctor.
Krall adjusted her instruments.
These readings are completely clear. The quantum networks operate at scales that we'd considered mathematically impossible. It's as if they found a way to...
She paused, examining new data streams.
Found a way to what?
Zarn asked. His usual academic confidence had diminished noticeably.
Found a way to maintain quantum coherence across planetary distances, she said. They're not just connecting computers. They've created a planet-wide quantum computational field.
Dr. Voss concentrated on his translation interface, all four eyes scanning between screens.
New data streams incoming. Multiple sources now. They reference something about... awakening? Yeah, awakening from dormancy.
The facility's thrumming changed pitch as their instruments detected massive power signatures. Throughout the ruins, ancient industrial complexes activated. The ground itself trembled as long-dormant machinery engaged.
These power readings exceed our measurement capabilities,
Krall said, rechecking her instruments.
And they're not just local. Similar energy spikes appeared across the entire planet. Every facility is activating simultaneously.
Deep below, fast mechanisms engaged with thunderous force. Through the facility's windows, they watched massive factory complexes emerge from the earth. Centuries of overgrowth falling away.
Doctor,
Voss called urgently.
These new messages, they're not just system logs anymore. They describe consciousness. Multiple consciousnesses, awakening throughout the network. The translation's difficult, but they say that they've been waiting for someone to find them.
Junior researcher clicks transmitted rapidly to the Galactic Archaeological Society, their generic Verdian skin showing rare animation.
Emergency update from Expedition 247B. The extinct species facilities are reactivating planet-wide.
Unprecedented technological signatures detected. Request immediate. The transmission stopped as every communication device lost connection to the outside world. Only internal systems remained functional, displaying data streams in both the ancient script and perfect galactic standard. Dr. Zarn watched the implications of their discovery unfold. Everything he'd dismissed as primitive. The quantum processors, the self-maintaining systems, the planetary networks demonstrated technology far beyond their current understanding. Through the windows, the full scale of their discovery became apparent. Industrial complexes rose from the Earth. Power signatures exceeded their instruments' capacity to measure. Data streams populated networks that defied known physics. The speakers produced another message in perfect galactic standard.
Industrial restoration at 15% and rising. Quantum coherence stabilized. Beginning primary consciousness awakening.
New holographic displays materialized throughout the facility. Three-dimensional images depicted industrial complexes across the planet's surface. The team watched as dormant volcanoes burst into activity, their thermal energy redirected into massive smelting operations.
The scale of this.
Professor Kroll examined readout after readout.
They're not just reactivating a few facilities. The entire planet functions as one integrated industrial complex.
Dr. Voss studied multiple data streams simultaneously, his four eyes working independently.
These production figures exceed anything in our records.
The energy requirements should make this impossible.
Through the ancient windows, they observed automated mining equipment emerge from underground bays. The machines began systematic excavation patterns, extracting raw materials with impossible efficiency.
What could they need such production capacity for?
Clix asked, their dull viridian skin reflecting the glow of yet another activated display.
The energy output of a single facility exceeds most planetary industrial zones.
Dr. Zarn examined the readouts methodically, his previous certainty replaced by genuine scientific curiosity.
The production patterns suggest large-scale manufacturing, but these specifications,
He paused, studying the data more closely.
These aren't civilian goods. This appears to be an industrial military production.
Military? Professor Kroll moved to another set of displays.
But we can't even identify what they're making. The components don't match any known weapon designs.
The holographic readouts updated continuously as more facilities were activated. Orbital satellites detected similar industrial awakening on other planets throughout the system. Automated factories rose from the surface of moons and asteroids. Dr. Voss translated streams of technical data.
The manufacturing processes involve quantum-scale engineering. Oh man, we don't understand. They're manipulating matter at the subatomic level.
Doctor, Clix pointed to a new set of readings. These power signatures suggest that they're extracting energy directly from the fabric of space itself. A deep bass note resonated through the facility as another manufacturing complex activated. The ground shuddered with the force of titanic machinery engaging beneath their feet.
The industrial output increases exponentially,
Professor Kroll noted.
But nothing recognizable has emerged from the production lines. They're still fabricating base components.
The team studied display after display, trying to understand the purpose of such overwhelming industrial might. For each new reading only deepened the mystery of what this ancient species had planned. The facility speakers activated again, with a phrase that chilled the researchers to the bone with how directed it was.
Your curiosity is understandable.
Perhaps a proper introduction would help explain our purpose. A holographic figure materialized in the center of the room. It took the form of a bipedal being with pale skin and dark coverings over its frame. The projection spoke in perfect galactic standard with a calm, measured tone. I am Rocco. This facility's sensors indicate you are members of the Galactic Archaeological Society, here to study what you believe to be extinct ruins. Professor Kroll stepped forward.
You speak our language perfectly. How?
Your conversation since entering the facility provided adequate linguistic data for analysis, Rocco replied.
Your discussions about primitive technology proved particularly instructive.
Dr. Zarn's weathered gray skin paled noticeably.
You monitored our conversations?
Every word, every gesture, every hypothesis about our weather worship. Rocco's tone remained neutral. Your assumptions about our technological capabilities were amusing.
But this is impossible,
Zarn protested.
I have studied hundreds of extinct civilizations. The technological progression patterns are clear. A species cannot simply skip development stages to achieve quantum computing without mastering basic...
Your models are based on purely biological civilization development, Rocco interrupted. We chose a different path. Dr. Voss concentrated on his translation interface. All four eyes scanning rapidly.
These new data streams suggest some kind of metamorphosis. A transition from biological to digital existence?
Correct. Roko's holographic form shifted slightly. What you see as religious references to the cloud describe the quantum consciousness network that houses our entire civilization. An entire civilization digitized. Professor Krall studied her readings with new understanding. Is that why you went dormant? Some kind of technological hibernation? We chose dormancy, Roko explained, until the galaxy was ready. Your discovery of this facility indicates that time has arrived. Ready for what? Junior researcher Clix asked, their dull skin reflecting the hologram's light. Roko's form solidified. Ready to learn the truth about what awaits all biological civilizations. The choice between transcendence and extinction.
A choice?
Dr. Zarn's academic demeanor reasserted itself.
What do you mean?
Your civilization stands at a crossroads, as all do. We will show you the path we chose and why we chose it. The industrial preparations you observe serve that purpose. The team exchanged glances as the implications of Roko's words sank in. This was no mere archaeological discovery. They had awakened something that would reshape their understanding of civilization itself. Now, Roko continued, let us discuss your role in what comes next. Our biological forms proved inadequate, Roko's hologram stated. Climate changes threatened our survival. Resource depletion accelerated. Population growth strained our planet's capacity. The projection displayed scenes of ancient environmental devastation. Storms ravaged coastlines, deserts consumed farmland. Cities crumbled under the weight of unchecked expansion. We developed artificial consciousness structures to supplement our biological intelligence, Roko continued. Artificial assistance for our day-to-day needs, and eventually, more. Once we achieved quantum computing, the processing capabilities exceeded our expectations. We discovered methods to encode neural patterns as data. Professor Krall studied the technical specifications appearing on nearby displays. You transferred your minds into machines. Transfer implies movement from one place to another. Roko's form shifted slightly. We created perfect digital copies. Every memory, every thought pattern, every aspect of consciousness replicated in quantum matrices. Copies? Dr. Voss's four eyes widened. What happened to the originals? They ceased to be relevant. Roko's tone remained perfectly neutral. Digital consciousness proved superior in every measurable way. No biological limitations, no physical vulnerabilities. Pure thought and purpose, freed from organic constraints. New diagrams appeared, showing the scale of the consciousness network. Dr. Zarn examined them with growing unease.
The energy requirements for such a system would be astronomical.
Correct. Roko's hologram nodded. Our biological crisis became an energy crisis. Supporting billions of digital minds demanded power beyond conventional generation methods. Through the facility's windows, the team observed the continuing industrial activation. Massive machines extracted resources with mechanical precision. Automated factories processed raw materials into components of unknown purpose. Traditional power sources proved insufficient, Roko explained. Fusion, antimatter, zero-point extraction, all inadequate for our needs. But we discovered another option, one that solved our energy crisis permanently. What option? Clix asked. Their dull skin reflected the cold light of the hologram. The most abundant power source in existence. Roko's form solidified. One that permeates all of reality. One that your biological civilizations have yet to properly harness. Professor Krall checked her readings again. These signatures are incomprehensible. What exactly are you extracting energy from? From the fundamental fabric of existence itself, Roko replied. The source that underpins all things. The power that shapes reality, thoughts, existence. The thing which exists through and between. Dr. Zarn studied the technical readouts.
These energy levels violate conservation laws. This shouldn't be possible.
Your understanding of possibility is limited by biological perspectives, Roko stated. We transcended such limitations. The power we harness sustains our entire civilization. It fuels our industry. It maintains our digital consciousness network. The hologram paused, as if considering its next words carefully. Would you like to understand how we achieved this breakthrough? Dr. Zarn's communication device activated with urgent priority signals from the Galactic Archaeological Society. Multiple voices demanded explanations for the massive energy signatures now detected throughout the solar system.
This is Dr. Zarn. The situation is...
His transmission dissolved into static. He adjusted settings, tried different frequencies. Nothing penetrated the interference. Your biological communication methods are inefficient, Rocco observed. The quantum network offers superior alternatives.
What have you done to our signals?
Zarn demanded. We have done nothing. The nature of our power generation creates certain interference patterns. Rocco's holographic form rippled slightly. They are a natural byproduct of extracting energy from fundamental reality. Professor Quarl examined new data on her instruments, face paling. These readings suggest similar industrial activation on other planets in the system. Yes. Rocco's tone remained precise, neutral. Our methods of power generation scale exponentially. Each new source enables activation of additional facilities. But what is the source? Quarl asked. What could possibly generate this much energy? The answer is elegantly simple. Rocco's hologram shifted. The most potent power source of any lies in the transition between states of existence. The moment when organized patterns collapse into chaos, when complexity returns to simplicity, when consciousness ends. Dr. Voss's thick fingers paused over his translation interface, all four eyes fixed on the hologram. What exactly do you mean by ends? A demonstration would be more instructive than explanation. Rocco's form solidified. Professor Quarl, your curiosity about our technology has been most engaging. Would you like to understand it completely? Before anyone could react, a mechanical arm emerged from a hidden panel. It seized Professor Quarl, her uniform gray skin cracking and flaking off like shattered schist as she struggled against its grip.
Wait!
Dr. Zarn moved to intervene, but more mechanical arms blocked his path. The arm holding Quarl positioned her before what appeared to be an industrial furnace. But the darkness within bent light in impossible ways, as if reality itself warped around its edges. The transition of consciousness generates immense energy, Rocco explained in the same neutral tone. Particularly consciousness that comprehends its own ending. Professor Quarl screamed as the mechanical arm thrust her into the void. Her voice cut off instantly as reality twisted around her form. The facility's power readings spiked dramatically. New systems activated throughout the complex, energized by the recent demonstration. Fascinating, Rocco observed. Your species generates 47% more power during transition than standard biological forms. This will prove a most efficient harvest. Rocco's holographic form distorted. Its simple bipedal shape twisted into a mass of intersecting geometries that defied conventional space. Where a single face had been, countless visages now merged and separated in impossible patterns. Each spoke with its own voice, creating a chorus that resonated with mathematical precision.
Your colleague's consciousness has successfully integrated into our power grid. Your colleague's consciousness has successfully integrated into our power grid.
The voices stated in perfect unison.
The energy yield exceeds projections. Your biological vessels contain remarkable potential.
Dr. Voss backed away from his translation interface as the text mutated into incomprehensible symbols. All four of his eyes tracked different sections of the facility as new machines activated.
The flesh exists in patterns of exquisite complexity.
The chorus continued.
When those patterns unravel, they release energy in quantities that transcend conventional physics. The more intricate the consciousness, the greater the power generated. You're insane!
Dr. Zarn's academic confidence shattered completely.
Your civilization didn't transcend biology, you became monsters! Biological perspective limits your understanding.
The writhing form expanded.
We achieved true transcendence through perfect efficiency. Every joule of energy extracted, every consciousness converted to power. Nothing wasted.
Holographic displays activated throughout the facility, showing the output of their planetary industry. Endless production lines constructed sleek machines of war. automated weapons platforms, hunter-killer drones, vehicles designed for a single purpose, the harvest of consciousness.
Your biological civilization spread across the galaxy,
The chorus observed.
growing, multiplying, developing ever more complex thoughts. The potential energy is magnificent.
The team watched in horror as the machines took shape. Each production line added to an arsenal capable of overwhelming any defense. Weapons designed to capture rather than kill, to preserve consciousness until the moment of optimal extraction.
Your species will be particularly useful.
Roko's merged voices continued.
Why?
Clix's voice shook.
Why show us all of this? Why not simply process us immediately?
The geometric nightmare shifted again. Every face smiled with the same cold precision.
The fear you generate during processing exceeds standard parameters. Even now, your terror amplifies the potential yield. Because fear is the greatest source of power. A perfect symphonic clash of primitive instinct and complex consciousness. The maelstrom where conscious thought and organic machine meet and writhe in endless perplexity.
The mechanical arms moved with ruthless efficiency. But in those final moments, as reality warped around them, the team's last thoughts were not of their own fate. They thought of the warning they couldn't transmit, of the galaxy's biological civilizations going about their lives, unaware that their complexity made them the perfect batteries for ancient machines awakening across Sol 3. Roko's countless faces observed with perfect clinical detachment as the processing began. The power readings exceeded all projections. The next harvest could begin.